Hey everybody, good morning. I'm gonna add I'm gonna add Dr. Chaffee. We have one second, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Invite. Okay. And hey everybody, Dr. Anthony Chaffee. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Great, great. Glad you had a safe flight to the States.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was good. It was not too bad anyway. It's like a Singapore, then Singapore to Seattle. So as far as these things go, it's not that bad.
Singapore, you said?
Yeah, yeah. So I flew from Perth to Singapore, and then Singapore directly to Seattle. So it's just two legs. So it's not too bad.
You're a tan.
And tan,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, hey everybody, thank you all for joining us. We're doing a little impromptu IG Live, which we've planned actually. So I do have a few questions. Some commonly asked questions that I want to ask Dr. Chaffee. I know, okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so fantastic. So I do have a couple of questions that I do want to cover, and then if anybody has questions, we'll take those and answer them as well. So let's start, first of all, with probiotics.
Mhm.
It seems like every day somebody asks me about it. Most doctors, even with functional medicine, they have an issue with going zero carb on a carnivore diet because of the probiotics. So what would you say for that?
Well, as far as taking probiotics, there's not a lot of great evidence to show that that's really beneficial. And the thing is that your microbiome in general should be dictated just by the food that you're eating. And so if we're eating what we're naturally supposed to eat, our microbiome should be reflective of that as well. So we should already have a naturally beneficial complement or optimal complement. Now, there may be exceptions to this. You take antibiotics or something else happens that maybe you need to reload these things. I think it will happen in time, or maybe just with some yogurt or something like that with live cultures should be enough. As far as probiotics themselves go, they're never just the probiotics, right? They come with sugar and sweeteners and other flavorings, which can actually disrupt your microbiome. The evidence for probiotics is in the literature, current published literature is not great. There's only small studies with a few participants that say, okay, well, there might be some benefits from this, and that's sort of what they're hanging their hat on. I actually met a researcher, a gastroenterologist down in Perth, who was actually contracted by a particular probiotics company. That's okay. Well, now we want a bigger study with a lot more people. Can we show that this is very beneficial? Because we have these preliminary studies that show that it is. And so they did this larger study with hundreds of people, if not thousands of people. I don't know the exact nature of the study because of what I'm about to tell you. And what they found was that actually it didn't really help. And maybe actually didn't provide benefit. Maybe it was actually a bit worse than people who didn't take the probiotics. And so, they were going to publish this, and the probiotics company basically sent them a letter from the lawyer saying, if you publish that, we'll sue you. Like you can't do that. And so the abstract is available, but the actual study is not. And that's just how industry research works. If they get the result that they want, they'll publish that. If they don't get the result they want, they'll bury it. And so it's so I don't see the necessity for taking it on a carnivore diet if you're eating what you're naturally eating. And if you're eating a mixed diet, maybe there is, but these studies suggest maybe there isn't. So I generally avoid them myself.
And I was reading a paper yesterday talking about how Nestle funded research showing how dead probiotics can still benefit your gut. And that was in a way to help promote their longer shelf life products that had probiotics in them, which by the time you eat them, they're definitely dead. Right. So it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to tease out this information. given there's just so much corporate interest in pushing their products. The only thing that I would say is that we don't live in nature anymore, and so we used to get exposed to a lot of soil-based organisms and a lot of probiotics. Even like ocean has the sea salt, the seawater has the probiotics in there. So even things like going to the ocean gets your skin exposed to probiotics, and there might be something there about maybe just spending more time in nature. There's also things in soil like humic acid, fulvic acid that we no longer get exposed to, and they've been shown to help leaky gut. So maybe it's more about that as opposed to having to consume the fiber as a source for those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely, and like you say, we are designed to live in nature. We've sort of removed ourselves out from that, artificially. We're using hand sanitizers and soaps and all these sorts of things, which I think are fine and have their place. But I think that you can overdo that. There was the thought in sort of the 90s, early 2000s that being overly sterile can actually lead to detriment in development, and certainly with allergies and things like that. You really do need kids sort of need to get dirty, and I think adults do too, in a certain way.
I agree 100%. There's a book called Eat Dirt. I think the author is Dr. Josh Atz that I read a long time ago. That was back when I was still understanding functional medicine and keto and things like that. So it was all about eating more unclean veggies. But if you put that idea aside, the rest of it makes sense with regards to our need to get exposed to those probiotics. Even through our skin, they actually percolate and they affect our gut bacteria. So let me ask you something that I also get asked a lot, which is indigestion with meat. So for some people who have not eaten a carnivore diet since birth, once they start eating a meat-heavy diet, especially at a later age when your natural production of HCl drops, they start experiencing indigestion and they feel heavier after that. So what would be your recommendation for those people?
Well, I think you should always eat to what's comfortable. I don't think you need to force feed yourself. And if you're finding that a certain amount is too much and you're having problems, then that's where you stop. You don't need to just keep eating. You don't need to attain a specific level of intake, as long as your body's telling you like, hey, this is enough. Some people can get quite averse to meat and fat as well, and it's more of like a sort of psychosomatic sort of reaction where you're eating fat. I mean, I had this too. I mean, I had this all growing up, actually, and even as an adult, when there'd be something fat there, my mom would trim off the fat. Maybe she'd like crisp it up in a pan. You just smell that. You just gravitate to it, like, oh my God, that smells amazing. And you're looking at it guiltily, like, oh, that's going to give me a heart attack, but I really want to have one. And you just eat one, and like, that's the best thing I've ever had in my life. And you have a couple more, and then you like literally feel queasy. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I ate that. I feel disgusting. Because you've been telling yourself, and you've been told by others for the last 40 years, 50 years, you eat fat, you're going to get a heart attack, you're going to die. And so in your head, you're like, this is poison, this is bad, this will hurt me. And you're eating it, and you're associating that actually like amazing flavor with, some bad outcomes. And so you can trip yourself out that way. And I noticed that I was doing the same. Even when I went carnivore, I was trimming the fat off, and I literally said to myself, okay, no, I believe the study, I believe the data, that's good for me. Eat the damn fat. I had to tell myself that, and I had to start slowly reintroducing more and more fat, because I just felt queasy and gross because of that history, and little by little I was able to reacclimatize myself and recondition myself to enjoy the fat. Now I love it, and it is great. So I think that can play a role as well, especially when people are just starting out with this, especially if they're doing low fat their whole life, or even low or no meat. Some people will say, well, I avoid meat because it makes me, feel worse or whatever. I think that a lot of that has to do with that early conditioning, and that you can recondition yourself. And also, depending on what you eat, your body is able to absorb it and digest it and process it differently. If you're eating meat with fiber and other chemicals in these plants that actually disrupt your digestion, you're not going to be able to digest it as much. It's going to get into your colon. That's going to cause a reaction with your microbiome. You can get more bloated. You can get more uncomfortable, and so that can play a role as well. But if you're just eating meat and you get through that conditioned phase, you'll start really enjoying meat more and more and more. You really enjoy the flavor of it. You enjoy the flavor of fat as well. And so I think that just give it time, but you don't have to force feed yourself. If you're eating some and you get to the point where like, okay, that's enough, just stop. That's totally okay. It may be just this conditioning part, but it also could be your body telling you that this is how much we want. I think taste is a really good indicator of how much food you're supposed to eat. If it tastes good, then keep eating it, keep enjoying it, and your body will give you positive feedback if it wants that nutrient, and then eventually it will give you less positive feedback and eventually negative feedback, say, hey, stop, seriously. You know, so I think you should listen to that as well.
I agree with everything you just said. And I think it's just that people go right away to the idea, oh, then maybe meat really isn't that great for me, you know, because we're just so brainwashed every single day. I have clients of mine that they believe in carnivore. They come to me, they want to do it, but then they go to their functional medicine doctor for some procedure, and they're telling them, no, this isn't even going to work if you're eating all this inflammatory meat. And it's like they get so frustrated. So what I would say is just trust in the process. We are carnivores. This is our species-specific diet, right? Now, and you know what? You got to train your body as well to redigest more meat, and it might take a few weeks, and that's okay. Just be patient. You can even look into betaine HCl just to support your stomach acid production until your body gets the message. It needs to start digesting more protein, so it starts pumping out more HCl. You can even take digestive enzymes for a short period of time until your body's own production ramps up back again. And those can really help you a lot. Yeah.
No, I think that's a very good point as well, is that, depending on what you're eating, your body's going to be making different enzymes and different things to digest that, because your body's extremely efficient at what it's doing. It's not just going to make a whole bunch of enzymes or insulin or bile or whatever if you're just not using it. And so, once you start eating that again, you start signaling to your body, hey, we're eating a lot of protein, we're eating a lot of fat, you're going to increase your protease and your lipase that you're going to secrete from your pancreas. You're not going to make as much insulin because you're not taking in all the carbohydrates. Your body will change the digestive enzymes and the molecules that it uses to process these things after the fact as well. And then that's another thing too, is that I've always done this as well. I just drink a lot of water while I'm eating a meal. What's it going to do? That's going to dilute your stomach acids and your digestive enzymes. So that's something that people have found to be beneficial as well if they're running into this, is just not eating or not drinking water, I should say, or any liquids within a couple hours of eating, and that will keep their stomach acid as concentrated as possible, and their stomach as empty as possible. And then you eat, and you can actually sort of trust with the stretch receptors and the feelings that you have, and the digestive enzymes that you have are a bit more viable. So it might be a better option, especially early on, to not drink water sort of within an hour or so of eating.
Great tip. Love it. Okay. Is fasting stressful for women?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're designed, like all animals, to be able to weather not eating for periods of time. Most carnivores in the wild won't be eating every day. They won't be eating certainly multiple times a day. That would be quite rare. Unless these little sort of animals that are eating just tons of insects and bugs and lizards and things like that. They have to eat a lot of these things. But for bigger animals, for bigger game hunters, they generally get like a bigger kill once a week or something like that, and they'll be able to feast on that. So I think we are adapted for that. I think we're designed for that. I also think that our so-called fasting metabolism is actually our primary metabolism. We're supposed to be in that metabolism as well. I think we've misnamed this fed state fasting state just because by the time we were able to look at biochemistry at a molecular level, everyone was eating carbohydrates. And so when you eat carbohydrates, it really disrupts your metabolism when you eat. And then when you fast, it looks very different. But when you eat anything except carbohydrates, it also looks like you're in a so-called fasting state. So if I eat 5,000 calories in ribeye, I am not fasting.
Yeah.
That is not a fasting metabolism, right? So it shouldn't be called that. I think that's a bit of a mistake. And you look at different populations, hunter-gatherer tribes today, they wouldn't necessarily eat every day. They wouldn't necessarily eat every few days. Sometimes there's a big gap in between that. So I think we're perfectly adapted to do that. Is it better to get the nutrients that your body's asking for? I think so, but I don't think that it's going to harm you unduly to miss a few meals if that's what your body's telling you. And there are studies as well that look at so-called fasting mimicking diet, which is just a ketogenic diet. You're just not eating carbohydrates versus fasting. And they find that, well, and they also find that, there's plenty of studies show that there's a lot of benefit to fasting. Also in the fasting mimicking diet, they find these same benefits largely. So I think that's largely to do with just being in that metabolic state. And if people are worried about this, there are a lot of studies. Sometimes people can have, maybe some skin issues or some hair loss. If people are doing really long-term fast, that's something that people sometimes find. And they find that with just a minimum of 100 grams of protein a day, you can actually do away with a lot of those side effects like hair loss. And I don't personally think that you would necessarily need to fast. I think if you have access to meat and your body's asking you for it, then that's fine. But I mean, it depends on who you talk to and what they think is fasting, because I generally eat once a day. So that, you're doing intermittent fasting then. I'm like, well, not really. I'm just eating when I'm hungry, and it just happens to be once a day. Sometimes I'm not hungry, and or I have to skip that one meal because I'm busy, I'm on call, I'm at the hospital, I don't have time to do anything food-wise. And so I just don't eat. So maybe I don't eat for 36, 48 hours. That's totally fine. We're completely capable of doing that. And I don't think that it causes undue stress,
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with when women go on a keto diet and they're still drinking coffee, and that's suppressing our appetite, right? Caffeine is the coffee bean plant's natural insecticide. It's designed to kill off predators. Normally it can do so with insects, but not with a large animal like a human. But it still messes up with our, appetite and thirst signals. And so if you're not eating because you are mistakenly thinking you're not hungry, then that over a long period of time, that could actually trigger malnutrition for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, if you're chronically under eating, you're sending signals to your body that you're in a famine and food is not plentiful, and that your biochemistry needs to change. Because you're going to have to slow your metabolism and start conserving more fat and not utilizing this and making all the different sorts of hormones and proteins and musculature that your body would normally do in times of plenty and stimulus. So that can be a problem too. When people starve themselves, if they're trying to lose weight and they're starving themselves and eating low calorie, low fat, just plants that we just can't absorb anyway. So I don't know, honestly, it's not even eating. And then just pushing himself. It actually pretty much destroy the metabolism. It's something that I've mentioned before, and maybe you've mentioned it as well, but there's that show, The Biggest Loser, where they just did these horribly, horribly designed diets and exercise regimens where they're just putting these people in very extreme conditions. And they lost weight, fine, but they checked their metabolism. It was just bottomed out. It was very, very slow.
Yeah.
And they trashed their metabolism. And so a lot of times when you do these sorts of crash diets and starve yourself, and then you go back to even eating just like a normal diet that maybe you will slam on the weight because your metabolism is just so suppressed. And so it doesn't matter what you eat, you're just going to, boom, gain weight. And they found when they studied these guys, after the first season, 6 years later, their metabolisms were still suppressed. So they never recovered since then. Now, is that because they've just permanently damaged their metabolism, or because they've taken on board all of these terrible suggestions and just perpetuated these things over the years. I would guess the latter, but for whatever reason, their metabolisms were not normal. And
Yeah.
so, they were not that's not very great for your health. And, they deviate just a step away from that, and their bodies are just going to balloon up and start storing fat rapidly.
Yeah. And they never addressed their addiction to food and sugar, right? I mean,
Right.
they continuously incorporated that sweet taste on a regular basis. So that's another problem.
Yeah.
So something that has happened recently on my Instagram, every time I log in for the monetization, my account is at risk of being demonetized. I'm wondering if, yeah. And I think it's because I reposted there. You remember that meme that everybody reshared in our community stating that Lucky Charms is, the Food Compass one stating that Lucky Charms is deemed healthier than steak. And it's completely accurate. I even went to the PolitiFact statement that comes up that it's misinformation. I actually read the whole article. It is accurate. That's exactly what the Food Compass is. They're saying, oh, it wasn't, government-funded food pyramid. Well, it was an NIH grant. Yeah, it's not a food pyramid, but it was government-funded, and it went to Tufts University. So I think that's and so what happened is that when I posted that, they put the misinformation thing, and they actually took it down. So when I got that, I took a screenshot of the fact that they took it down, and I reposted it with the initial post so that people know which post was taken down, and I said that I stand by my post, and I think that's what triggered it. So I'm wondering, are you getting things along those lines in terms of I don't know.
For that one, yeah, I think I've been, permanently shadow banned and throttled on YouTube. I think that's definite. Like I was at one point, when I first started the channel, I was getting like 15,000 new subscribers a month, and then all of a sudden, wham! It just stopped, and I never got more than 4,000. It was 4,000, never more than 4,000 every month. It's just every month, and so it was just like, okay, well that's a bit too consistent. And you could look at all different shorts that were going viral and things like that. Other videos that were doing very well, they were going up, wham, and it was just plateaued after that. And so I think that I was definitely throttled for that. But I was talking about like regenerative agriculture, and they're like, oh, too close. And so there was like this, like, oh, for more information on climate change, please click here. So it wasn't like I didn't get a strike. I didn't say you had misinformation. It was just a warning shot that just said, hey, you're talking about something that maybe we don't want you to, and we're watching you, and that was it. And so the channel was a bit throttled after that. For that, I definitely remember that Food Compass thing, and the reason I remember it the most is because that was literally sent to me. That graph was actually sent to me and everyone else in at least in Western Australia, probably around Australia, in our work email saying, hey, we are adopting this as a hospital system, and so this is what we're doing now. We're adopting the Food Compass as our official food policy. And I saw this, I don't know, a year and a half ago, more, and I was just shocked. I wrote this really long email to them. I was just like, hey, this is something that I've looked into. I would disagree on these points, and I would like to talk to somebody about this. Happy to, have a meeting or whatever. I got an email back. It's like, okay, we forwarded this on to, the relevant people, and you can talk to them. Obviously, never heard back from any of these people. But people talk about, it's like, oh, well, that chart's not, that's not something you can use it, whatever. Like, well, I'm sorry, but that chart was sent to me. Where watermelon was the #1 best food that you could ever eat. It was 100, had a score of 100 out of 100. What the hell is that? It's like, so, I mean, what 100 out of 100 means is this is perfect nutrition, right? It's 100 out of 100. It loses no points for anything. It has everything that you need, nothing that you don't need. That's what 100 should mean. And so, so we obviously watermelonivores. That's what they're saying. And Honey Nut Cheerios and canned peaches were like a 98. So canned peaches were better than fresh peaches. It was like, what the hell are you talking about? Stuff is in syrup, like sugar syrup. And so, I mean, these things are so dumb. And I see people, say that it's like this is it's not fair to compare these different things because they're in different categories. You can't compare things outside of categories. There's one person like Dr. Ed, so I just think it's just he's just a blowhard, and he just makes a lot of ridiculous videos that he's literally never thought more than 2 seconds about, and because he's just so aggressive that people seem to like that for some reason. But I think he's just dead wrong in all these things, and he talks about that. He's like, you can't say that, you can't compare these two things. Well, one thing you can compare is the recommendation that they have used to, with this data, right? So if you have something in green, they say, hey, get as much of this as you can. Yellow, maybe temperate. Red, avoid it at all, if possible. And so if you have watermelon in green, canned peaches in green, frosted flakes were ranked above normal cornflakes, so the sugar made it better apparently, right? And so and you're putting those in green, meaning eat as much of this as you want, and you put red meat, hamburger, eggs, butter in red. Well, you can't compare those two groups. Well, actually, you can, because you can compare the recommendation, right? The recommendation is eat a whole bunch of frosted flakes and canned peaches, and really avoid red meat and eggs. So that is just such an absurd statement to say that you can't actually compare these things because they are there in that color coordinated fashion to be compared. Eat a lot of this, moderate amounts of this, really avoid this. What do you want? It really doesn't get more simple than that. It's plain English.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's an uphill battle we're fighting every day. And when our reach is being suppressed, that irks me beyond words, because how are we supposed to warn the audience? I mean, we are the health experts. When a social media company co-opts this outside third-party group, the PolitiFact, right? And like, who are they exactly? Like, we are the health experts. We are the ones whose opinion should matter. So, but then again, there's the other thing is that just because somebody is an RD doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're talking about, given that we know the origins of the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics and the fact that they are co-opted by the food companies. You go to an Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics conference and it is lined, it's like an expose for the food companies. Not only are they present there, all those food companies, they actually present, they're the spokespeople, they're presenting presentations to the registered dietitians to offer them continuing education credits. Really?
Yeah.
Coca Cola, what does Coca Cola have to do with a food, with the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics? Why should they be there?
Yeah.
So it's a real problem, and unfortunately it seems like the only way out is when every single one of our people, their health goes to crap and they have to learn the hard way and they have to do their own research, and that means that this is just going to take a very long time for change to happen. And I'm normally a very optimistic person, like unrealistically almost in every area of life, but when it comes to nutrition, I am not optimistic.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an uphill battle because we have a lot of people with a lot of money, behind the opposition. And, I heard a statistic the other day that Coca Cola spends 11 times more in nutritional research than the NIH. So how are we supposed to get out good information? Do you make it illegal for industry to do research? It's hard to do, because if you have a product, obviously you need to prove it. Let's say, hey, okay, I think this is good. Let's do some studies showing it. So it can be something that's beneficial. And obviously, people in industry have a vested interest in saying, hey, I believe in my product. I think this is good for you. I think this gives a benefit. Let's do some research to show it. Like, you need to be able to do that. But you have this abuse as well, that the sugar companies are putting out 11 times the amount of nutritional research that the NIH does. And, the NIH is, are they doing perfect studies? They're funding stupid things as well that may not be, that beneficial. But, it is difficult. And, the sugar industries make something like $1.3 trillion a year. So there's a lot of money behind this. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. and so they have a lot to lose, and so they're going to protect. They're trying to protect that, and in some unsavory and unethical ways, I would say, by bribing people and putting out research that is just designed to manipulating the data in ways that either show benefit to their side or doesn't, and they suppress it, bury it, like the probiotics studies, or just muddy the water enough that you just say, like, oh, well, this was like all these inconclusive studies. Oh, I guess it's inconclusive. It's like, no, all of those were yours, And so they have all these other studies that actually say, well, no, actually, this isn't really good.
Yeah.
So it is very difficult. I think the best way is just doing what we're doing. Unfortunately, that's sort of the as strong of a weapon as we have right now, is just going directly to people and just saying, look, here are the facts and data as I see them. Here are the evidence, like doing what Thomas Sowell does, is just digging down to the bedrock of a situation, just saying, here are the facts, here's the evidence, you decide. And I think since we've been doing that, more and more people have been coming around to this. And I think, the truth will out eventually. And as more people are waking up to the fact of all this corrupt practices and problems with the food guidelines and recommendations, the more they become aware of that, it doesn't matter how much industry research or how much people go on there and say, oh yeah, it doesn't matter, obesity's genetic, there's nothing you can do about it, just eat all the cake and ice cream you want, had nothing to do with you being overweight or being sick, and it won't change if you stop. That's a bit insane, first of all, and it's very disempowering, saying that you have nothing you do is under your control. That's garbage. And people can see that for themselves, and they change their diet and they start eating right in the way that's actually right for them. And they get these dramatic changes, and they lose a lot of weight, and they put on muscle, and their brain works better, and they feel better. That's going to hit home a lot harder than just some resident expert who's been paid off to say something they know is wrong.
Agreed. And I think we all have this common sense or this intuition. At some point we'll listen to it. I know I didn't listen to it when I was going through dietetics school, and I actually followed what I was being taught, and I believed everything. But eventually you will have moments where you will have to listen to that gut instinct and understand that it just makes no sense. Anything that comes out of a package could not possibly be better for you than real whole foods that made us humans.
Yeah.
The food that we ate when we had no heart disease, when we had no diabetes or obesity or any of this stuff. So I know you don't have much time. I know you have to be gone in 20 minutes. So I'm going to try and give you a little bit of maybe we'll do 15 minutes, or you'll have at least 5 minutes to get ready. So I asked all the questions that I had written down, but we do have questions submitted here. Let's start with the submitted questions. Okay. Crispy Carnivore 22. Also, what are your thoughts on TUDCA and ox bile? Those are supplements. Do you have anything to share about that?
I don't know what the first one is. I haven't really heard of that before, but I think supplements in general, unless you have some sort of deficiency or problem, making whatever you're trying to supplement with, be it bile or whatever, that's really the only time you should supplement. So ox bile.
They're both bile. I just
okay.
Yeah. So TUDCA, toru, or so deoxycholic acid, more commonly referred to as TUDCA, is a bile salt that is found naturally occurring in the body.
Okay. So I don't think that most people would need to take ox bile or any sort of bile supplements, because your body's going to make it. So some people get worried because they don't have a gallbladder or something like that. Well, you're still making bile. It's just that you're not storing it in your gallbladder and then expressing it out. Some people will develop what's called a pseudo gallbladder, which is just an outpouching of the common bile duct, and that actually acts as a gallbladder, and you can get the same sort of effects physiologically. Otherwise, you're still going to make bile. It's just going to be dripping out constantly by your liver, and it's just going to start pooling in your small intestine. So you just sort of have to space out your meals to get proper absorption of the fat. Now, if you for some reason, like maybe at like a Thanksgiving or a Christmas, and you wanted to eat like a big chunk of fat and meat at the same time, you're probably not going to absorb a lot of that because you don't have a big concentrated pile of it like you would if you had a gallbladder. So maybe you take some ox bile or something like that for that meal, and that would help you, absorb that. But the problem with that is that your body's making a specific amount of bile. I think that's specifically because it wants to absorb that amount of fat. Again, your body is very efficient at making all of these things. I don't think it's just going to make an arbitrary amount of bile. It takes energy and resources to make that bile. And so, if you're just making a bunch of random stuff randomly, you're going to die. You're just going to be wasting resources. You're not going to be efficient. You're not going to be utilizing things properly. And so I think that you make the amount of bile that your body wants to get a return in fat. And so if you take ox bile, you're actually forcing your body to absorb more fat than you want. Whereas if you don't take that and when you run out of bile, your body, it's very difficult for your body to absorb fat after. You can a little bit, but most of it goes out in your waste. And so, that should be like an overflow valve. Your body says, like, this is how much we want. We don't want more after that. So if you take ox bile, you're forcing your body to absorb more fat. I have no idea what that's going to do to you, but I know that it's not what your body's asking for. So I would just inherently avoid that. If you're in that sort of situation, that like sort of one-off situation where you wanted to eat like a big meal for social reasons or maybe practical reasons, like I'm going to be able to eat once, and I'm not going to be able to eat for 3 days because I'm going on, into the Sahara Desert or something like that. Fine, maybe take some ox bile. But I think most people in most circumstances don't need to take that.
Fantastic. Okay, another question. The keto.diary opinions on avocado. I did a video on that. Avocado actually has an antifungal called Persin, and it's not just in the skin the way they would like to make you believe. It's actually like, if you look up my video, I linked to the actual study that shows that it seeps into the flesh. So right? Would you agree? It's not something that I would think is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't eat any plants at all. I don't think you need it. Is it better than other plant? Probably, but it's, if you have access to meat and you have access to fatty meat, I think you just stick with that and you'll be fine.
Agreed. Okay, another one. Can we occasionally have a small amount of berries or maybe just a teaspoon of honey once in a while? I think we just Dr. Chaffee just answered your question. The thing is, there are a lot of people who might not react negatively. You're 18, 19 and great health. You can probably do some of that. But if you really want to optimize, if you really want to follow our species-specific diet, what's the reason? I don't see a necessity for that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah, and I mean, the thing is, can we do this sometime? You do what you want. You're an adult. You get to make your own decisions. I choose not to do that because I don't think that it adds any benefit to my health. I think it actually will detract from my health. If you're not in a position where you're starving, you're like, I need nutrients, I need calories, I need something, then I don't see the benefit in eating those sorts of things. If I have access to meat, I have access to fat, like that's what I'm going to eat.
Exactly. Okay, and then what are your thoughts on Lenna F. Cooper and her association with John Harvey Kellogg? So Lenna F. Cooper is the co-founder of the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics. She was kind of taken in by John Harvey Kellogg's, and he kind of mentored her and made her the head dietitian of the Seventh-day Adventist religion church, who really was a major driver in driving this vegetarianism movement. So again, that's the whole reason why nutrition and dietetics is so off base. They're climbing the wrong mountain because they were co-founded by a person who believed that a vegetarian diet is going to get you closer to God because it's going to suppress your urge to masturbate. And so we've talked about this extensively, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, another one of the submitted ones. Do you want to add something to that?
Oh, no, I just disagree. I mean, yeah, I just agree with that. And it's something that's very interesting is understanding the history of these sorts of things, because people just go, oh, well, it's, the dietetics and nutritionists, well, they would know. Oh, God, it's not necessarily the case, because these things have their origins and they have their influences like everything else. And so understanding that origin and understanding those influences is very important. And I think your story is extremely telling, because you learned all this, you have a PhD in it, and you were following it like to the letter, like this is what you're supposed to do, and it wasn't working. And so you were smart enough to go like, okay, this isn't working. I'm doing X, I'm supposed to get result Y, and I'm not. And so there's something must be wrong with that, you know, and I'm not messing up. I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do, and I know what we're supposed to do according to these people, you know. And so you came to the conclusion, okay, well, they must be wrong, you know. And you know, I've spoken to other dietitians that that once they sort of had this realization, one of them even said to me, they were just sort of stunned, and they just said, my entire education was a lie, you know, like everything else is just a lie. And I know that now. I'm like, you've shown it to me, like I've seen it. It's like this was a lie. This was all a lie. And it's very plant-based. And you know, Dr. Kellogg was, people don't realize this, but he was like a congressman. He was a very influential scientist, to the point that I was actually reading Will Durant, who's a famous, very famous classicist and historian. And my dad was actually friends with his grandson growing up. And so I was reading something from him, and it was a quote, and I forget exactly what it was talking about, but it said, you know, there are these two sort of subjects, and, you know, this is what these people say, this is what these people say, you know, what people A say and what people B say, but, you know, Dr. Kellogg's, you know, agrees with people B, and, you know, I usually agree with him on most things. So it's a very influential guy, you know, just on his recommendation, like, wow, Dr. Kellogg says that, okay, I'm just gonna, on a balance of probability, I'm gonna go with what he says. So he was able to influence, you know, American culture and society in vast ways. I mean, he's the guy who convinced the nation to circumcise young boys, you know. And this was again because this guy was just beside himself with the idea of people masturbating and fornicating. Like it just for some reason just really tripped this guy out, and so he's just like, this ends today, you know. I have to save these people from themselves. Sorry?
Without anesthesia.
Yeah, right. So that sounds awesome. And you know, and there's actually studies showing that you have like early trauma, like painful trauma, to a kid, it actually sets them up to be more timid and you know, a bit less you know, confident and physically you know, successful and things like that. Sports are not as confident, not going after things. They're just like, oh my God, I'm gonna be hurt. Oh, I don't want that. It actually has a lasting effect on people as an adult of early childhood trauma, infantile trauma, like circumcision without anesthetic, and that's been shown to cause later problems in adulthood. So it's not benign. It's not just like you just take this little piece of skin off. Well, first of all, the skin's there for a reason, right? I mean, like we are genetically, you know, we're supposed to have this thing. It just grows naturally. It's just part of the body. And then we're just taking this off because we just know better than nature and God, you know. It's just like, well, do you? You know, I mean, this is a perfect, you know, it's like saying the same about, like, you know, female circumcision. And there are cultures and societies that think that's a really good idea. I think that most people would disagree with that. So, you know, male circumcision is a much lower version of that, obviously, but there are areas in different populations that absolutely mutilate you know, the young boys as well, and in ways that, you know, probably people can look up for themselves, but, you know, aren't very tasteful. And so, you know, you can do these things, but, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good idea. And so, you know, Dr. Kellogg was that influential. He got convinced, and that's why, like, basically all Americans now do the sort of thing. Some people have sort of gone away from that in recent generations, but it's still like a normal thing to do. Is just circumcise. We're going to circumcise it. Why? You know, it comes from Kellogg trying to stop people from masturbating and fornicating. Makes it more difficult if you don't have a foreskin, and then people figured out lube, and that was the end of that. But they kept the whole, you know, let's circumcise for those reasons, even though that they weren't. It didn't do.
Had nothing to do with science, had nothing to do with the evidence of what diet is helpful. It simply had to do with the Seventh-day Adventist Church believing that the urge to masturbate and masturbation is a sin, and so we were going to do anything, right? And that's why Dr. Kellogg's, he boasts about the fact that he didn't even consummate his 40-year marriage with his wife, and they actually ended up adopting kids.
Which
Anyway,
is just insane, right?
yeah,
But that's it. I mean, that's the level of psychosis basically that this guy had, is brainwashing that his
yeah,
predecessors laid on him, and
yeah,
completely whipped this guy. And he wasn't very influential. He was very smart and very successful. If only he had not had that horrible influence put on him, probably could have done a lot of good for the world. Probably did do a lot of good for the world, which is why
yeah.
he had the reputation to affect these other sort of changes. It's very sad that he was brainwashed and manipulated as much as he was, because then he
Yeah.
ended up brainwashing, manipulating hundreds of millions of others after him.
Unfortunately. And the fact that he took in the co-founder of the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, brainwashed her, and then she co-founds this large organization in nutrition that literally ended up influencing my life. And to this day, this is the same kind of curriculum that is influencing and pumping out all of these registered dietitians that have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and it sucks too, because that's who you go to for nutrition advice. Well, have you spoken to a nutritionist? This is like, well, it depends on the nutritionist you're talking to, because there are a lot of nutritionists like yourself who've just seen behind the curtain and just say this is wrong.
Yeah.
And then they start actually looking into things a bit more, and then there are others that haven't seen that yet, and they're just doing their job, and they've learned this thing they're doing, and they have no reason to suspect that it's completely wrong. And unfortunately, that's the majority of nutritionists at this point. For people that want to know more about the whole history of that, and the influence of Seventh-day Adventists, who are continually putting out data and studies that are extremely biased. I mean, that's the Loma Linda Medical Center in California. I mean, this is the Seventh-day Adventist medical school and hospital system. Like, you don't get into this school unless you are. I looked at it when I was looking at applying in medical schools in California. And I looked at it, and it was just like you had to have a letter from your Seventh-day Adventist pastor or whatever to get it. If you were not in the Seventh-day Adventist church, you would not be considered for this school. And I wasn't really a school I was interested in going into anyway. But
The Constitution or something?
I don't know. If it's a private school, then they can probably do it. But yeah, it is discriminatory, isn't it? It's discriminating on the basis of religion, which you're certainly not allowed to do at a state school. If it's private, but that's the thing too. When you have private schools that take federal money, they are they have similar restrictions, and so there are some places that even if they just take student financial aid, government financial aid, like they have to follow certain rules as well. But whatever their situation is, that's how it's set up. Like, you have to have a maybe it's like you don't have to, but like it really helps, sort of thing. But that was part of it. It was just like you need a letter submitted by your pastor or whatever, saying that you'd be a good Seventh-day Adventist doctor here.
Wow, I did not know that. Well, Dr. Chaffee, thank you so much. I know you have to go. I'm going to re-share this on my YouTube channel, and I'll post all of your links so that people can find you more easily. You have a wealth of information, and I am so grateful that you are in this community, that we have another voice that is highly educated and spreading a good message with regards to nutrition. So thank you for all that you're doing. Say hi to Elle for me, and enjoy your time in the United States. Now I know you're here for a little while. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was great to see you, and always enjoy speaking with you and doing these sorts of things. And hopefully that was helpful for people.
I'm sure it was. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Chaffee. Goodbye, and you can watch the replay later. Bye, everyone.
That's good. See you guys.
See you.